You know, we never want to forget. I'm never overlooking the fact there are people who maybe didn't have pleasant father experiences or didn't have pleasant mother experiences when we have these celebrations. There are some people that resent it almost, and because they didn't have anybody to do that for them, and they raised themselves or they raised their siblings, and many of situations like that do exist in the world, and I realize that. And so somebody is the father figure for that family if they didn't have a father, which I pray they did. That certainly was God's plan, wasn't it, to have a mother and a father in each household. This is why nothing else works as well as that would, because that was God's plan for all of us, to have two of them there raising us. The Christian husband and father, didn't you expect there'd be something like that today? And I tried, some years I feel like the preacher, I lambasting, and some years it feels like it's celebrating, and I'm going to try to do a little mix of everything, just simply talk about what should we look like, what does God want us to look like. You know, did you know that Father's Day was proclaimed a holiday by President? Anybody know what president claimed it Father's Day? Calvin Coolidge, and in 1924. And it would be observed on the third Sunday in June. That's how he set it up. And here's the way it traditionally is set up to work, and we have failed over the years as far as Americans to remember these traditions, or we've just changed them. But here's the way it was supposed to be. You were to come to church wearing a red rose. No, nobody gave it to you. The church didn't give it to you. You bought one yourself, and you wore a red rose as the official flower for the occasion if you had a father living and to show appreciation for your father. And if your father had passed away, then you were to wear a white rose and come to church with it on. And now church over the years has changed it. It's like everybody who's a father stand up and we'll give you a flower, is what a lot of churches have done over in the past, or some kind of a gift. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with it. But the original intention was you came in to remember your father, and either he was living and you appreciated him, or he'd passed and you weren't forgetting him. And I almost did that. I thought, where can I go and stop and get Lynn and I both a white rose to wear today? I didn't. But I think from now on I'm going to start doing that, and maybe we as a church will start buying those and having them available. But it would be better if you would just go buy one yourself and wear it to church in memory of your father. And Mother's Day the same way. I'll check into that one and see if it's the same flower. I haven't looked at that lately. But that's the way it was. But did you know how it really started? Before the president got this idea, Calvin Coolidge, you women are going to love this. It's always a woman that comes up with the greatest ideas. That Memorial Day was another one of those ones where General John A. Logan gets the credit, but there were a lot of women who were thinking about Mother's Day when they lost their loved ones, and they wanted to remember it too. But now here we have Father's Day. It actually began in Spokane, Washington, when a woman by the name of Sonora Smart Dodd thought of the idea while listening to a Mother's Day sermon in 1909 while she was at church. So in 1909, she heard a sermon about mothers, but it inspired her about fathers. Having been raised by her father, you see, because her mother had passed, Henry Jackson Smart was his name, after her mother passed away, Sonora wanted her father to know how special he was to her. And he had just meant so much to her because he had been so selfless. Her father made parental sacrifices and was in her eyes a courageous, a selfless, and a loving man. Her father was born in June, so she chose to hold the first official Father's Day, as she declared it, in her community in Spokane on June the 19th, 1910. And then the president later got the idea, it took us several years, obviously 1924, to make it an official holiday of this country. So I find that interesting. I hope you did too. But now let's look at what Paul says about mothers and fathers and families. And this is a place right now in the Bible I imagine a lot of ministers are going to this year, if they didn't do it last year. They're probably doing it this year. In Ephesians chapter 5 to start with. And I'll turn to that. And I'm going to start with verse 21. I gave them verse 22 on, but I'm going to actually read verse 21 further because it adds a lot to the story. But it says this from 21 to verse 33. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body on which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and will be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. A lot of observations there Paul gives. Paul's an apostle. He's ordained by heaven. He's given the words of heaven to say to us. So his words are God's words to us. Understand this. This is not one man who's, some women might think, chauvinistic, and people who don't understand the Bible probably think he was. Not so. He's being inspired by what God is telling him he wants for the family. You see, the family and the church are the two highest institutions in the world, the most important to God in heaven of all things. And so this is why you see family after family, house after house. If there are many families that are not honoring God in such a way, it's breaking his heart and heaven's too. Because this is the plan he had, and God knew this is the plan that would work for all people if we would all just trust. 4 times in these verses I read, 4 times the husband is told to love his wife. A person might say, well, what's the reason for all that? Why so much repersonification, if you will, of an idea? Why keep restating, and validating? Well, I think there are some reasons that are given to a man. Now, a lot of people misunderstand this whole thing. He's not superior to a woman. No one ever said it. God certainly didn't say that. But he's got a role to play. And if he wears his role properly, carries it out properly, and she carries out hers, as the first verse I read says, submit to one another, that takes place. You're submitted to what each other needs. I try to always look at what would bless and make Linda happy, and she does me too. And our biggest argument in life sometimes when I'm trying to bless her and she's trying to bless me at the same time, and we argue over who gets their way. That's our worst problem most of the time. I kind of like it though. But she tells me she's the world's most submissive woman, and I better not forget it. I said, that doesn't sound like a submissive statement. But you know Linda as I do, and I love her, and she's a kick, to say the least. And I want to be worthy of her respect. I want to be able to be that husband that she's not ashamed of every day of my life. So let me tell you some things that must happen in a man's house. And you all are saying, well, gee, we've pretty much gotten there. We're all grown. Our children are raised. Most everybody here can say that. But it's not a bad thing to keep remembering, because you might be able to teach your children to teach their children and keep passing down these godly things that are our heritage, because our children are probably not doing as well in church as maybe we'd like them to be, and maybe in some cases they are. But we can still tell them what God would desire and keep him in their mind. I think we have to do that forever, the rest of your life. Never stop speaking about God to your children, whether they go to church and worship him or not. They need to know that still matters to you to the rest of your days, the rest of your life. Your conviction never changed, no matter what they're doing with their life. So here's one of the first things you'll do. You'll realize as a husband and father, a husband, he's a leader. He is to be a leader. This involves a few things. I'll use 3 D words to describe the leader. The first one is this. This involves decisiveness. A leader is decisive. You don't hem-haw around, oh my goodness, my wife and I, I've told you about our biggest argument sometimes is who's going to bless whom, but also where we're going to eat when we're driving. You're going down the road and there's traffic everywhere and you got to watch what everybody else is doing. Where you want to eat? I don't care where you want to eat. I don't know. We'll pick a place. Well, I'll pick this place, but you don't want to eat there. You won't eat where I want to eat. Well, how do you know? Tell me. We'll do that thing all the time on the car. And I told you a few years back, I believe, we finally got it figured out. I finally got wise, and I said, okay, here's 3 places I'd like to eat. Which of those 3 would you pick? And that has saved me a lot of arguments. Unless she doesn't want to eat any of those. Oh, there you go. Best thing to do would be go home and fix something at home. Save the money, probably. If you save the money after going to the grocery store at all. Well, it involves decisiveness. Now think about people that you admire in the Bible, and I'm going to list a few here. Joseph, Deborah, Samuel, Joshua, Isaiah, Paul, and John the Baptist, they were very decisive people that stood out to me. When I gave myself the test, I said, pick a few people. And they're the ones that came to mind. Just a few. They were decisive and they were good leaders. Joshua declared with no uncertainty near the time of his own death. Now think about it. He's about to die. This is his last breath, so to speak. It's his last days. He gathers the people before him and they listen. I don't know how he gets this amphitheater sound out there without a microphone, how they hear him. But hordes of people are around listening. And it's like he gave a loud speech and he said, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. I think he had to have shouted this a little bit to the audience. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. It's really not what he wanted them to do. This was sarcasm. But as for me and my household, I love these last few words. I get goosebumps every time I read them. We will serve the Lord. That was decisive. He says in his dying days, I'll never stop. I have decided to follow the Lord. No turning back, no turning back. And they did respond by saying, far be it from us to ever serve anyone but God. So for a while they heard the message. And then at the end of Joshua, we see where the people did as they saw fit in their own eyes, just like they did at the end of Judges. Seemed like they had to have a decisive leader to keep them moving. Well, anyway, he was decisive. People who are in the household of God, and that should be you, fathers, you should be decisive. Your wife says, I'm tired of making decisions. Don't make her do it all the time. Maybe you got a wife that likes to make all decisions. Don't let her. Don't let her take your role because you've been too weak or squeamish about it. You can certainly do it together. As it says here, submit to each other. But if you're willing to be decisive, she will respect you for that, even if she doesn't always agree. My wife's had to follow things I wanted to do, and she would have done it differently. And after I got done, I would have done it differently. But she made me feel like I at least was doing what God asked me to do. Lead this house for Him, not for me. It involves decisiveness. A leader also involves something else. It involves discipline. There must be discipline in a house. He does not ignore or excuse his children's negative behavior. This is a discipline. Now, I know too many parents who let their kids get away with too much. There's the parent who will let the kids build up a bunch of stuff that's negative activity, and then one day just blow up on them. Just yell and shout and throw stuff around and get angry. Put fear in them for a little while because your voice gets really heavy and you look really angry in the eyes, as though that's the way to get them to respect you and love you. So they ignore and they excuse their children's behavior for a while until they're fed up with it. That's not discipline. Proverbs 13:24 does say, though, this: he who spares the rod hates his son. Now let's stop with that part of the sentence. He who spares the rod hates his son. Now the rod looks like corporal punishment, and no doubt there was a lot of that going on in the world over the centuries. But it wasn't abusiveness. It doesn't say abusiveness. It says corporal punishment in the sense of maybe a spanking, maybe a swat on the back. But that's not the only answer. It really means discipline. He who spares discipline hates his child. Let's put it that way. But he who loves him is careful. I like this part of the sentence. The word careful's in here. Is careful to discipline them. In other words, punishment fits the crime. And you do it with love, and you do it with regret, and you do it with the fact that there's reservation. You don't want to do it, but you want your child to be respectful and behave and learn how to act in public as well as private. And so your attitude isn't, I'm going to get you for this, son, girl, boy. It's I love you, and I'm not happy about this, but this is what we'll do. My mom, when she tried to spank us, start crying before she even started. I used to crack me up because if I started to cry when she did, sometimes it'd only be one swat instead of two. And you're probably thinking, ooh, spanking? The world doesn't let you say that today, do they? That's not called appropriate by the new school. The new school's children are doing so well now. He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is careful to discipline him. It involves discipline when you're going to lead your family. And this also involves a third D word, decorum. I love that word, decorum. You like that word? Decorum simply means good behavior or good taste in how you speak and dress and how you address your children and your wife and treat others. You have pride, a sense of pride in a way of how you look and how you carry yourself. You don't embarrass your family by your behavior or your appearance. You take care of yourself. This comes from Proverbs 22:1. A good man is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Some people say, I don't care what people think of me. I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to do what I want when I want. Well, that's wonderful if you're going to be in an isolated world. But your children, your family, they would like for you to be respected in public. It means a lot to them. I can't tell you how awfully excited I am every time Linda comes out of a meeting where she's with people, doctors or lawyers or business people in town or executives of other companies or whatever, and I hear what they say to her and how much they appreciate her for what she does in the community. She never says it herself. You wouldn't know it from her. Not too much. But I always am so happy to hear people feel that way about my wife. And I think I want them to feel that way about me. I used to tease every friend I ever had that was in the ministry. I said, you know what, I think I can stay at this church or this church over my life because they wouldn't want to lose Linda. I might not matter so much, but they wouldn't want to lose her. Saying that being kind of crazy, I guess, but that's how I think about her. I want her to think that way about me. Decorum, carrying yourself, taking care of yourself. Men, cleaning up. Number 2 this morning is this. To be a leader is one thing. He's also another L word, a laborer. Now this is an important one. The price of his work will have 3 words, price, provision, and power. The price of his work. By example, he teaches the children to earn their way in life. Nothing's free. Stop telling them that like the world does. The world sure talks about going out and getting in line for this, 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 and this, and you might have to get a hand up for a little while. A lot of people need a hand up. But when you make that hand up a hand out for life, you're failing God and yourself and your family. You teach your children to earn their way. You don't encourage laziness, in other words. Nobody else, and get this, nobody else owes you anything. You have the freedom to pursue your happiness in America. That's how it reads. Not have it given to you. A lot of people today believe that, though. If you look around and listen and watch long enough, somehow that's gotten to be the motto. What can I get? What will they give me in whatever line I get in? And like I said, a hand up's one thing. A hand out for life is not right. And it's not right with God. And that's not what God wants for anybody. You heard the old adage, give a person a fish, you fed him for a day. Teach him to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. So there's the price of his work. From the time of Adam. Now think about Genesis 3:19. Adam and Eve just did one thing wrong, right? God said, I'm going to take care of you. I'll provide for you. Life with me will be utopia. You'll be in Eden. You'll have plenty to eat. You'll have to have nothing but fun with each other in life. And then the man and the woman couldn't leave what God said was his alone. They couldn't leave their hands off of the fruit of the tree he said not to touch. So as a result, in Genesis 3:19, he tells Adam, by the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. And now this is the message for all of us. God says, look, I'll provide in heaven for those who go there to live with me forever, and you'll see what you could have had here on earth. But until then, I want you to learn to appreciate what's given to you. Work for it. From the time of Adam up to and including now, God has expected mankind to earn his way and not be a burden on other people. That doesn't mean you don't get help and people don't offer it. But you see, here's the thing. It's not a burden when you're in need and I get to volunteer to help you, or I get the joy of being able to serve you or do something with you in your life as you're moving along. But to mandate it on me, that's a different story. You take away the joy of my ability to bless you when you mandate it or demand it. I find it much more joyful to be able to do it because it was in my own heart to help someone while they're hurting. Well, the provision of his work will be another thing. Not just the price of his work, but the provision of his work. There's one exception to our labors in life, of course. There is an exception. We are to help widows and orphans in their distress until they can get on their own 2 feet. James writes this in James 1:27. He says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Now there's the exception. To help these people, to help the orphans until they can get to be old enough to take care of themselves, to help the widow who's down on her luck. Because maybe in those times especially, the women stayed home. They didn't work. They didn't have income. They didn't have Social Security. They didn't have anything that we have today. And so there was a need. Paul writes to Timothy, however, about all this, and he says this in 1 Timothy 5:8. Anyone, this is in the Bible, this is not Mark Irwin talking, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith, and listen to the rest of the sentence, and is worse than an unbeliever. If you're too lazy to work and take care of your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. Now, I'm giving a message to people who work. I know you all do. You may know somebody who doesn't. You may know a child you're struggling with in your own family life, and maybe you don't. Maybe this has nothing to do with anything or anybody you know of. But it's good to know what God says about it and to know that you're trying to arrive to be that person that's not being spoken about. In other words, the one who is above an unbeliever, because you do work, you do take care of your business, and you've earned the right when retirement comes to retire because of your life's labors. So there's the provision of work. He expects it. He expects there to be a price to be paid, and we paid it from the garden on. And there's a third thing here. Then there's the power of your hand. He wants you to have busy hands, not idle hands. Laziness is not honored nor tolerated by God. Ecclesiastes 9:10 says this, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead where you are going, there is nothing working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. Now, this was in the middle of a negative speech, by the way, in Ecclesiastes. It wasn't really a positive message. This is in the middle of all that. I grant you that. But he tells them, don't get busy doing nothing. Get busy doing something. Don't waste your life. It's a gift. I was talking to Ellen this morning when she was in my office about how life has gone so fast. I look back and I think of all the time people spend in their phones, hours on end, in front of their TV sets. I've done some of that, and I'm ashamed of it at times, I have to admit. Yesterday and the day before, my wife and I said we're going outside and do some stuff together. And how satisfying it was. We were doing it together. We weren't in different directions living our life. We were living together, doing something constructive. And I have to tell you, I was winded at times. I was tired, and I was worried about getting poison ivy, no doubt about it. But it felt good. And I thought, you know what? It's felt good so many times when I remembered doing something with my hands, doing something that might contribute to making someone else's life better or make what God's given me better. My partnership with Him. So, it is certainly one of those things that is a labor. And it's the power of my hands as well as the provision of my work and the practice or the price of my work. There's the last thing for a father. Besides being a leader, he is a lover. Ooh. Well, first of all, let's get past what some might think right away. It's divine love. Matthew 22, verses 37 through 38 says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Heart, soul, mind. This is the first, and it is the greatest command. Of course, he goes on saying, love others as yourself. But for this point, you have to start off as a leader of your household. They need to see you loving God and not just talking about it. It's like a father who says, go to church, it'll be good for you, but goes to bed. It won't mean a whole lot, will it? You'll fight him. You won't want to do it. It's like, why can't you go then? I have actually known that experience a few times when I was a child growing up, and then later on it changed. It got better. We, the kids, had to remind our parents that we need them to be the example, and it helped them. They listened to us. It's a divine love, leading your family to love God. That's how God intended it to be. The men are supposed to do that. That's what Joseph was expected to do when he married Mary and raised Jesus and his brothers and sisters. Be that man, and that's why God picked him, who knows how to lead your family to love God. A husband and father's love for the Lord will get notice from the family. Don't expect love of God to dwell in others so much if you, as the leader of your household, aren't leading the way, or it's not that important. And don't be surprised when your children stray and wander and make decisions you wish they wouldn't make. That's what's going to happen when you don't put God in the middle of raising your children. And they will suffer from other choices they make that will hurt them. Yes, there's recovery. Yes, there's forgiveness. Yes, you can get a new start. Of course you can. But you got to hope for it every day until it actually happens. And pray for it. So it's the divine love, but there's another thing about this love, being a lover. It's this. It's domestic love. I'm leading up to that, actually. In Ephesians 5:25 through 28, I already read that, so I won't read it again. But it just talks about love your wives as Jesus loved the church. Let's emphasize that just a little bit. How did Jesus love the church? You know? Yeah, you know. I'm asking a rhetorical question. How did he love the church? He loved her so much he died for her. He bled. He had a lot of pain to rescue her, to make sure his wife was safe from Satan and the rulers of the world who would go against the family and hurt them. Today, men, you will have to protect your families from anything that might happen in this world, whatever it may be, that would interfere with their Christian walk. If they don't have that, nothing else is going to matter. You're going to find this out. We're all going to find this out when the Lord returns. Nothing else I have will matter. No other pursuit will make a difference if He's not in my life every day, and then theirs too. And that's why we keep praying and hoping for them if they haven't always followed our example, but you still be one. Still do what is right. This domestic love, it's giving all the time. Ephesians 6:4 in the next chapter, in one verse, says this: Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instructions of the Lord. Don't be a reason your children are irritated. It's like, Dad, you're always saying to do this and do that, but you don't do it. Dad, you're always yelling at us. Why don't you just talk to me? Dad, you never pay attention to me. Dad, you never listen to me. Dad, you won't read to me. You never touch me. I never get a hug. You never tell me you love me. A child should never be saying those things to their father. This domestic love that you have in you, men, shouldn't have to be asked for by your children. They should see it in you and how you live every day and how you treat them and have time for them. Now, yes, their time and your time frame aren't always matching up very well. And if they're interrupting you in the middle of something, at least make sure you get back to them at a time where you can give them attention. It's awful to hear that child say, Daddy, can we play ball today? Can we put, not now, son, not today. How about tomorrow, Dad? Well, we'll see. Saturday comes around. Daddy, you got time today? You're not at work. Well, I'm working on the boat. I'm working on the camper. I'm working on the yard. Yeah, you can do all that stuff, but they've got to hear a message somewhere along the way that they're a priority, that they matter that much. So don't train them up and exacerbate things. Don't exasperate them. Train them in the ways of the Lord and love them and care for them. You know, a man truly loves his wife and his family when he puts them before himself in all things. His words and actions bear testimony to his love. And you see, everything else you do will matter then. Then you can say to the child, now I'm going to be doing this, I need your help. I'm going to clear some woods. I got to work in the car. I want to show you, son, how to do some of this for yourself. Come sit with me. I'll show you. I'll let you even try it. Those are the kinds of things we can do in domestic love to show our children we love them. And for the daughter, you teach her by how you love your wife what kind of man she needs to look for when she finds a husband. Because of who you are and what you've been. She's going to want to find a guy just like Dad. You hope. And if you're not the right one, then you hope she doesn't. While you work on getting to be the guy God always intended you to be. You love your wife and you love your family. You put them before yourself, and your words and your actions, they bear testimony. I want to tell you, remember the movement a long time ago? I don't know if it goes on anymore at all. I don't hear about it. Promise Keepers, I don't even know if it exists anymore. I hear nothing about it. But it did for several years. Coach Bill McCartney of Colorado, I believe, was one of the founders of Promise Keepers. And in the National Fatherhood Initiative, he listed 10 ways when he was speaking at that to be a better dad. And I want to tell you that list of 10 to end the service here today. It'll go along with what Paul would tell you in the Bible in this way. Number 10, we'll go backwards. Spend time with your children. A good father doesn't just provide, he also comes home from work, setting work aside, and plays with his kids. Number 9, earn the right to be heard by your children. Don't just assume they have to because you're authoritative and you've got a loud voice. Talking to a child on his or her level on a regular basis will open up channels of communication where they'll want to talk with you more. Number 8, discipline with a gentle spirit. Discipline that is merely a reaction from anger doesn't teach a thing. It just shows them you were mad, now they're in trouble. That's not what you want them to get out of discipline. Number 7, be a role model. Little girls who respect their fathers will expect more from the men they meet later in life. Little boys will learn how to treat women from what they see their dad do day after day with their mom. So be a role model. 6, be a teacher. Your children will ask endless questions of you all the time you're around them, won't they? Daddy, what's this? Why does this happen? Why does butterflies change colors after they were a moth? Who knows what they might ask you? We used to have family prayers. The youngest one of the family was my sister. And we would always think, oh no, when she's asked to pray for the meal, we're going to hear about the butterflies and the bees humming and the birds flying. And she was thanking God for every little thing in her son. And we'd all go, oh. My dad would sit and smile through those prayers because he liked to hear his children pray. And in time, we got used to it. We realized it wasn't so bad after all. So, Michelle, it's all right. You can keep on praying for butterflies. Be a teacher. A lot of the world's still unknown to them as children, isn't it? Those of you who still have little ones, you'll find that out. 5, eat together as a family. Don't get so busy you don't ever eat together anymore as a family. You saw, let's see, what was that movie called about the football player and the family that had Taco Bell? Somebody help me. The Blind Side, thank you. Remember what the Christian family was doing during the football game? And the young man came into their house to stay, and he sits down at the table because he never got to do that at his home because his dad was never there. His mom didn't fix a meal, and he sat at the table. And the mother looks out and sees him sitting there and tells everybody to turn off the TV, and he teaches them you should sit together as a family for a meal. And they go in and they do that. And I assume that's part of the true story of what happened. I thought, you see, kids still want to do that. They might gripe and complain, oh, my God, get your elbows off it. Well, okay, do I have to eat all this? Put up with all that. Just listen to it anyway. It's part of the growing up experience. But eat together as a family. The world's a hectic place already. This time together provides structure and family unity in a way you might not imagine. If you ever watch Blue Bloods, I love how they have their family prayers and their family meals. And some of the things they talk about I could care less about, but other things are kind of funny, but they sound real. And they get to air out to a family, understanding that we still love you and respect you if we don't agree with you. Eat together as a family. 4, read to your children once in a while. Reading to your children gives them a jump on education and also provides a vital time of intimacy. I know a lot of men grew up and got through school safely and didn't learn to read very well. It doesn't matter to your children. I don't think they'll make so much fun of you. They might start out doing it until they realize it's a sensitive thing. But if you read to them anyway, no matter how good your reading skills are, they're going to remember you took that time. They're going to remember that. I used to love it when my dad would do his old goofy country poems he made up or heard somewhere I never heard before about Billy Goat's Gruff and some other stuff he used to talk about. And a poem he used to write in our books every year about an owl and an oak. But see, I remember it to this day and I can still recite it. Let me tell you what my dad told me since I'm on that, if you don't mind. This is an aside. There was an owl who sat on an oak. The more he sat, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why can't we all be like that wise old bird? Now, my dad wrote that in every one of my autograph books for every year of school that I got a new autograph book for my classmates. He reserved the right to put that in the front page. I remembered it. Later on, I found his Marine Bible and a whole bunch of stuff. I realized he carried it with him in Korea during fighting. He brought it home. And that little teeny Bible was important to him. It had a metal cover on the top, paper on the bottom. I think either I gave it to Michelle or her son now, but I had it for a long time. And those things you remember. I guess the point is I'm sitting here saying, as a father who's now going to be 70 this year, I remember what my father did, the things that were good. Even though I used to punish him and was mad at him for so many things in life that didn't go right, I do remember a lot of good things I'll never forget. I never heard him judge people out loud, ever, not once. He knew everybody was flawed. He knew he was flawed. So why hash through it and make people feel worse, I guess. But he wasn't one that did that. So read to your children and spend that kind of time with them. Show affection is number 3. Have you ever been in a restaurant and seen a teenage girl with her arm around her father? It's a rare sight. It's one that is born of years of affection. Or a young man talking to his dad. Or just yesterday, Lynn and I were watching a guy walk out in the parking lot in front of us at Walmart. Went in to get a few things, and we were coming out. And I learned from an old couple in one of the churches we were at a long time ago that never stopped holding her hand. So we were holding hands. It's kind of neat because for years I went fast. I'd say, come on, catch up, let's go. Because I wanted to get to the car and she wasn't walking fast enough. I started slowing down, realizing I needed to do more of that. But in front of us was a man with his little boy. They were holding hands. They were both carrying a bag. And the little boy asked if he could carry it. So Dad gave him the bag and said, here, don't drop it, and gave it to him. And they were walking. You could just hear him. You couldn't tell what they were saying, but they were just talking all the way to the car. And I kept hearing him say, Dad. And I thought, that guy's got it. That son's going to remember his dad took time, hold his hand and walk out of the store with him and talk about whatever was on his mind. Show affection. Touch your children. Give them a hug. Don't say, I'm not the type to hug. A lot of men are doing that. Stop it. Learn to hug. I'm teaching my son-in-laws both to hug. Because that's something they didn't get from their fathers. They told me they weren't used to it. I said, well, you're going to have to get used to it because we do that here. And now they do it with a smile. 2, realize that a father's job is never done. From the day they're born to the day they marry to the day you meet your grandchildren. If you show a consistent life of caring as a father, your wisdom will be sought for the rest of your days. This morning, both my daughters sent me a text. One called me and one texted me to tell me Happy Father's Day. One, because she's going to be out of state today, traveling, said, I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'd be at church with you today. But just to let me know how much they appreciated me. They said, I don't want you to ever forget that. I really didn't need anything. I told Lynn I don't need anything, but I did appreciate it. And it meant a lot that they were going to do that to start off their day no matter what. They had to do that first. Well, number 1's this, and Coach McCartney, it figures with it being promise keepers, because husbands and church-going men are important. But number 1 on the list of 10 best ways to be a better dad is this. Now remember, he says 10 ways to be a better dad. Respect your children's mother. That means you don't abuse her verbally or physically. You don't sit around, play with the remote, pick your nose while she's doing all the supper. If she works and you both work, you're both working, but you don't have to do anything when you come home. That's wrong. You share the responsibilities. Advertisers will pay over $1 million for 30-second ad, Coach says here, during the Super Bowl. Why? Influence. 30 seconds they can influence you. In 30 seconds they believe they can make up that money by making you believe this is the product for you and you have to have it. Your children, on the other hand, will watch you and your spouse for at least 18 years of their lives. 18 years, not 30 seconds. If you respect their mother, they will too. And maybe that young man will remember how to treat his wife, and that young girl that you raised will know what kind of man to look for when she marries. Not settle for some bum who's just going to do whatever he wants and not treat her like she deserves. There are a lot of people that deserve not to be married because they don't know how to treat somebody. But that's because nobody raised them and taught them how. And that's sad on us as a society. But McCartney was right. When they did the Promise Keepers, they were right. They need to call men back to God if they're ever going to have godly households. And the men need to know how to be fathers and husbands, and how to treat everybody with respect and treat themselves with respect. Especially treat God with respect, because He will give you everything you need and more if you always trust Him with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your mind. Let's pray. Thank you for fathers, God. Thank you for all of the ones that have stayed home and loved the wives, raised their children, and been responsible. Their families are better off for it. I see families that have generations of men who get it, because the grandfather showed the father showed the grandson showed the great-grandson, and you can see it in that family. There's a legacy of respect, of love, of goodness, especially a legacy of having Jesus in the family center. I don't know what it will take, Father, but I pray that we can stir hearts with our life to want you in their life, to put you in the middle of their homes every day. Until you return, Father, help us to be faithful, and thank you for all the fathers who have been, and bless them and their families from now and forever. In Jesus' name, amen.